Hey guys, welcome to The Thinking Christian, helping you think theologically about everything. My name's Nolan, and my story starts back when I was 16. I had grown up not believing in Jesus, thinking all of it was just kind of nonsense, and so I saw the world through the lens of basically there is no God. And so that's who I was, and that's where I was until I basically got talked into visiting a youth group at a church down the street. And I remember sitting in this kind of like dingy youth room, looking around at all the other kids and thinking, these guys are total nerds. And like, why am I here? And just kind of like trying to get through it. When the guy up front was talking about the glory of Jesus, as he revealed himself in Mark 9, something of his kind of godness breaking through, and he's showing these people who he actually was in eternity and is currently. And as this guy is talking about the glory of Jesus, in that exact moment, I hear God in an inaudible voice in my heart say, I have always known you. Just weeks earlier, I had been telling a few people that I would never believe in God unless he kind of revealed himself to me. And in this exact moment, God spoke to me in a way that only I at that age could have fully understand, that I had this deep longing to be known. You know, I was finding my identity in everything else but Jesus. But from that point forward, I remember just looking forward at like the speaker and thinking, like, I don't know anything about Jesus, but whatever that is, like, that's what I want. I want that. And my heart just instantly turned to Christ. I remember like crying, like I was just breaking down. I went up front one week after that at that youth group to ask about what Christians believe and like what was happening to me. And I remember the youth pastor handing me a Bible. And it was at that point that I started from Genesis onward to begin to have my whole life, my whole mind, and my whole view of reality reshaped. And so from that point forward, I began to think theologically about everything, began to see the world through the new lens of the gospel of Jesus, and began to have really the way I approach each dimension of life start to change and be informed by the gospel. And so as a pastor now, I'm 33 years old. I've been a pastor for 7 years up at a church in Portland, Oregon, and I'm actually moving down now soon to Arizona to start a new church, to do a church plant in the Phoenix area. But after these 7 years of pastoring, what I have seen over and over again is that as new people are coming to know Jesus, because this was a church, I mean, we're baptizing hundreds of people, seeing dozens of new people come to know Christ, dozens, every year come to know Jesus and start asking really hard questions. What I began to realize is that you have all of these people who now find themselves in Jesus, now find themselves knowing God, but they don't yet think about everything from God's perspective. They don't yet know the scriptures and haven't kind of read enough to zoom out and see kind of the big picture of the Bible and begin to apply it to life. And so as we were seeing all these new Christians, I would have situations like this. One young guy, I remember, walks up to me. He had gotten saved at our young adults ministry, and after I get done preaching, he says, "Man, that was so good, and I have so many questions." And I'm like, "Hey, hit me." And he goes, "Hey, so like as a new believer, my siblings are kind of into this kind of religious thing, and I want them to come to know Jesus. They don't believe in Christianity, but what if kind of I go to their thing and they then come to our church?" And I was like, "Okay, well, what's their thing?" And he says, well, yeah, so they get together in the middle of the night around a fire, naked, and they call forth the dead to kind of like interact with the dead." And I'm like, I'm looking at this guy. This is legit his question. This is his question about Christianity as a new believer. And I'm going, like, buddy, like we super probably shouldn't do a necromancing seance like with your homeboys. Like that's not gonna work. And he's like, "Oh, okay." And I'm starting to point him to scriptures that talk about this exact thing, and he's going, "Oh," but like just pause for a moment and think, like, this guy was a sincere new follower of Jesus saying, "I want to submit my life to what God wants for me." And here he was asking this kind of question because, like, really the world is presenting theology. The world is presenting ideas. And our job as Christians is to look at the world through a theological lens informed by the Bible. Now, even as I say that, this idea that the whole world culture kind of has theology, I want you to realize that every human being on the face of the planet is a theologian. Like there's not like two categories of people who think theologically and people who don't think theologically. When I say I want us to think theologically about everything, you need to know that every human being made in the image of God is a theologian. So here's what I mean. Like, we live in a culture shaped by theology. If I go to the Thai food restaurant down the street from my house with just amazing Thai food, I just love it. When I get into that building, what I'm going to see there are these little statues of animals or a little statue of the Buddha. And there are often incense burning on these statues. And sometimes there's food or toys or things like that. What's going on there is theological in nature. Every time we meet someone with the name Muhammad, their parents often didn't just name them that because it's a common name, though in some cases that's true. But that name is theological in its origins. It comes from a theological story, a story about an alleged prophet and God and all of this stuff. And so we live in a world that has a theology. I remember being a new barista, one of my first jobs out of high school, and I was like talking to the lady there and kind of sharing that I was a Christian. And I remember her telling me like, "Well, I'm not a Christian." And I'm like, "Oh, like, well, what do you believe?" Thinking she'd probably just say, "I don't believe in anything." And she stops, and she kind of reaches into her pocket and pulls out these things, and she says, "I believe in crystals." And I at first I'm like, thinking she's joking. I'm like, wait, what? And she's like, yeah, no, like, I believe in crystals. This one gives me confidence. This one makes me feel beautiful. This one helps me in relationships for this reason or another. This one gives me power. And she's literally outlining for me a theology, kind of a view of immaterial things, metaphysical things, God-related things based on these crystals. And everyone in our culture has some form of theology, even if it's atheist theology. If you know the term atheism, of course, it's atheism, non-theist, not believing in a God. Well, their absence of a belief in God is still a theology. It's not just like, hey, you don't believe in anything. It's that you actually are informed by your lack of belief in there being anyone on the other side of this reality. Because what does the atheist believe? Well, at the end of the age, when the universe burns up, there will be no judgment on the other side. And our life now sort of evolved from primordial soup. And so we are, if anything, really lucky to be here. It's sort of, we're here on accident. It's random happenstance over the course of billions of years and kind of a cosmic explosion. And now here we are today. That's our origin story, according to atheistic theology. And then when you look at the span of life we are given here right now, it's not even given for the atheist, it just is. And you're saying like, here I am, this is all I have. And so when you have that worldview, that theology shaping your worldview, what you're going to do is you're going to approach Monday with a different lens. You're going to approach Saturday night with a different lens. And so what we're going to do on this channel is I'm going to present a theological teaching, because ultimately, if all of us are theologians, the question is not, are you a theologian? Are you thinking theologically at all or not? Really, the question is, do you have better or more biblical or less biblical theology? Do you have more biblical or less biblical theology? And so on this channel, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through, in this first kind of series, what we call systematic theology. Don't be intimidated by the term systematic theology. Really, all it means is basically the two terms, right? Systematic, or kind of like a logical or linear categorical laying out of the teaching of the Bible, and then theology, which means the study of God or the logic of God. Okay, and so when you talk about systematic theology, what you're really doing is you are basically coming from having read all of the scriptures And from Genesis to Revelation, understanding who God is, then you're sort of zooming out of the scriptures and saying, okay, if we were to take all that we learned about God and lay it out in a logical fashion in different categories, what would we teach? And so if you read a systematic theology like book, for instance, Wayne Grudem's Systematic Theology, or a short, really easy read by R.C. Sproul, Everyone's a Theologian, you can take these books, and what they're going to do is in each chapter lay out categories of what we understand about God, his work in the world, who we are, and all the things pertaining to theology in kind of logical categories, okay? And so you're going to have categories like theology proper, which is really zooming in on who is God and what is he like. Or you can look at creationism, or you can look at salvation, or what's called soteriology, soter being the Greek term for save. Okay, so soteriology or salvationology, what has Jesus done to save us? Or you could talk about the problem of sin, and which is called hamartiology, or basically hamartia, the Greek term for sin, sinology, like what went wrong in the world. And what you'll find is when you lay these out in a logical way, it all starts to make sense, and then we can approach the world with a new kind of lens. My middle son is a little guy who he's only 4 years old, but even when he was like 2 or 3, we discovered that his eyes, one of them actually turns inward because he's compensating for being unable to see things properly. And so one of his eyes is very weak, the other one's a little bit weak, and so he kind of compensates by turning in and getting kind of a clearer picture. But what we did is we went to the doctor, we got him these glasses, okay? And now he's this cute little hipster dude, 4 years old with little hipster glasses. And all of a sudden, his eyes started to turn back, kind of relax and be centered again. And what I want you to see is that when we human beings are sinful. We're broken. The Christian worldview actually articulates this well, that no one is righteous, no, not one. We have all gone astray. We are all kind of plunged into sin and brokenness. And the result is that we don't see the world rightly. Just like my little guy, we look at the world and we sort of have to compensate, and we're crossing our eyes and trying to figure out, but it's still this blurry picture. Reality is blurry. Decisions we make are blurry. The way we approach money and sex and fun and entertainment and our iPhones and like all of this stuff, we approach it wrongly, right? But when we take up the lens that is offered to us by God, this scriptures, which serve as sort of hipster glasses for us, if you will, we put them on, and we can sort of be recentered again on Jesus. That is why theology matters, that we approach the world through the lens of grace, through the lens of Jesus, and begin to see everything rightly and begin to really be recentered on what truly matters. I want you to walk with me as we walk through systematic theology in this first session. In the next episode, we're going to talk about theology proper. But today, I want you to realize all of us are theologians. And the question is really this: do you have more biblical or less biblical theology?